Boatworks today is sponsored by Total Boat and Alexial Yacht Coatings, as well as supported by the generosity from the beautiful folks over on Patreon. Thank you so much. So welcome back to the shop, everybody. Hope you're all doing well. My name is Andy with Boatworks today, and this week I get to finally close the chapter on something that has been a long time coming. The transom is done. It is done. Now, sure, I still need to extend the stringers and put in some additional knees and reinforcements, but that's a problem for another week. For right now, I want to go through all of the grinding, the sanding, the shaping, and then the glassing, kind of show you how all this played out. At the end of the day, I'm actually pretty happy with it. So now with the prep work done, I got everything sanded, shaped, wiped down, degreased, dewaxed. It's ready to go. So with all that out of the way, now it's time to start actually laying some material. Now for the resin here, I'm using laminating poly resin, and the actual fabric I'm going to be laying up here is going to be 1708. Now, because these main face pieces, they're pretty good size. I want to say it's about 5.5. I don't think it's quite 6 feet across, but either way, they're still pretty good size. I need to pre-coat the surface just so that I have something for this glass to kind of stick to, at least for a short period of time, until I can start actually wetting it out. Once you start getting the glass saturated, at that point, it's going to stay put, but until you get to that point, it can get a little sketchy. So when I'm initially setting this large piece of glass in place, there's one thing that I really need to keep in mind, and that's that I need to make sure that the top edge of the glass is not higher than the top edge of the Kusa, because that's actually kind of what screwed me a little bit on the first round, which took the prep so long, is I had a little piece of glass sticking up across the port, starboard, and center top edge. And anytime that's going to happen, that's going to prevent, when coming down in the next stage when I'm actually doing the tabbing, that's going to prevent the tabbing from being able to conform to the radius along the top edge of that Kusa. So intentionally, knowing that this glass is going to stretch somewhat as I'm wetting it out and working it with the roller, I'm trying to initially set it down about a quarter, maybe 3/8 of an inch lower than that top edge. And then as I'm wetting this out, working the material, that will eventually stretch up. And ideally, I like to have it be shy by about maybe an eighth, maybe a 1/16 of an inch across the top. When I'm mixing up this resin, I'm working in 16-ounce batches, and I'm catalyzing this at around 1.5%. Now, when I'm laying this down, at least on this initial first sheet, I am not worried at all about applying the resin too heavy. Actually, I'm trying to intentionally dogpile it on here. Now, coming up next, I'm going to be applying a second layer, exact same size, and I'm going to be just as heavy-handed with that. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm doing it this way. The first one being, I don't want to waste the time trying to go be slow and meticulous with the resin here. Once that resin is catalyzed, the clock is running. So I'm just trying to just get it up as quickly as I can. Now, in the past, I've talked about having laminations that are resin rich, and that's not something that we want. Now, the reality is that the glass will only hold as much resin as it can hold. Now, if you go over this with a fin roller, which is what we're going to be doing, any resin that the glass does not need, you'll be able to push that out while you're also working out any little pockets of air that might be trapped between the layers of glass. So now at this point, I've got 3 face layers and then 2 layers of tabbing all the way around. Now in total, ideally I wanted to have 4 face covers. So at this point, I had to make a decision. I could either charge on through, get this 4th layer down, or I could, kind of hit the brakes a little bit and let everything that I laid up already, let that set up, let the heat dissipate, and then go ahead and apply the 4th and final coat. Well, truth be told, at this point I was tired, I was feeling pretty beat up, and I just said, f it, I'm just gonna do it. Now, one other thing that obviously you're not gonna be able to pick up across camera is that the material that I had laid up already, it was in full curing stages, right? So it's throwing off heat. Like you can physically feel the heat on your face that's coming off that transom. Now, when you're working with resins, and especially when you're working with resins over a fairly larger area, heat is not your friend. It accelerates the gel time of the resin, meaning that you've got less time start to finish to get it all wet out and then come back with the fin roller to get any of the excess resin and or air worked out. And it was right about here that I realized that I may have gotten a little bit greedy trying to get this 4th coat on wet on wet on wet. Now, what I noticed was that the resin wasn't working into the glass anywhere near as easily as the previous layers. The glass itself, there's little ripples here and there. The glass itself wasn't shifting in order to work those ripples out anywhere near as easily as it was on the previous coats. And this layer was starting to get sticky very, very quickly, like to the point where it was pulling off little chunks of fuzz off of my roller. That's not good. So here I'm like, switch gears. All right, I only got really half of it well saturated. So now I'm switching over to the roller, and it's going downhill real quick. So realizing that this is going to turn into a train wreck real fast, I started mixing up new fresh batches of resin. Smaller batches, for everything else I was always doing 16-ounce batches. Well, now I'm going to switch over. I'm going to start doing 8-ounce batches just because I can get them from the tray and just basically dogpile it on here. I'll deal with the consequences later, but I at least wanted to make sure that all of the glass was well saturated. And again, if I have any voids or air pockets, after the fact, I'll deal with those. I'll come back and touch them up, but I didn't want to have dry glass. Now, one obvious thing that I could have done had I had it was when I was actually wetting out the main face of these panels, if I had a larger roller. Now, I would have loved to have had one of those 7 or 8 inch glass coater with a K, glass coater roller covers, but I didn't. And I still would have needed to use these small like 4-inch cigar rollers just because it's kind of a funny quinky dink, but the head of that little belt sander that I used for establishing all the radiuses around the whole transom. I mean, it's my #1 go-to sander. But the radius on that is the exact same radius as these small little 4-inch cigar rollers. So using those little rollers, it makes wetting out the glass over those radiuses so much easier. Now, yes, it's a little bit slow and tedious on the larger areas, but it's what I had. It's what I had. And while this last coat didn't turn out perfect, it's done. And at the end of the day, sometimes done is just better than perfect. Now, overall, in total, I've got 4 face layers and then 3 layers of tabbing all the way around. So I would estimate that the thickness of this skin overall is right around 3/16 of an inch, which for an inner skin is much thicker than typical, probably by about twice. Most inner skins usually average around 1/8, and then your bulk tends to be more on the exterior part of the laminate. And I can see that there's some little uboos here and there that I'm going to have to come back and sand and kind of touch up, but nothing major. I would say this is probably the worst of it. I must have had a little chunk of something on the back side of this 4th layer of fiberglass that just, well, it got embedded into the transom. But overall, none of this is a big deal. It's not going to compromise the integrity of the transom at all. So any of these little spots, I'm just going to give them a quick sanding. If it opens up, if there's like a little air pocket beneath it, it opens it up, I'm just going to come back and I'm going to fill it with some thickened epoxy, fair it all in, pack it just to get rid of that air, and we should be good to go. And on that note, I think I'm going to wrap this week up. So as always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you're not already subscribed, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. Thank you in advance. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to leave those down below. I will do my best to follow up with you. And as always, I want to thank you for your time. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next Sunday. Or Friday for the folks over on Patreon. Right now it's time to go get the happy hour on. Later.
This has been a Boatworks Today production.